Quintessential 90s music that lives and moves us today. And we're going to be talking about Unforgettable with producer Andre Fischer. I'm Clarice Dodge with Studio Expresso. And Andre, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
And a little bit about Unforgettable. The song, of course, was recorded in, or actually was written by a gentleman named Irving Gordon in 1951. It was recorded by the great Nat King Cole, and then his daughter, Natalie Cole, released on Elektra in 91. So set the stage a little bit, Andre, because that album was sort of a comeback album, if you will, and it did great things. It won several Grammys for Song of the Year, Album of the Year, Best Vocal Performance, Arrangement, Best Engineered. So, and it was like 7-time platinum, and of course the song is the top 10.
Actually, more than that.
More than that. Tell me.
Almost 20 million worldwide. So,
okay.
Because you're talking about somebody who has to audit royalties.
That's
so, in order to do that, you have to find out, where did it sell and how many times. Seeing that we have to preoccupy ourselves with the business part, so that always bothered me. Not for myself, because that's not the game I play, but for Natalie, because that was important to her. Not the numbers, but the fact that a lot of people liked it.
Absolutely.
And also, if you said it was comeback, if you said that to Natalie, she would be pissed.
Okay.
As far as she's concerned, Unforgettable was a deviation, a new direction, as opposed to a comeback, because the last album she did had Miss You Like Crazy on it, which was a hit, and also before that, Pink Cadillac. So as far as she's concerned, when people would say comeback, I could see that her butt would tighten up and her eye would twitch a little bit. So
thanks for setting the record straight. It's definitely an amazing song, sung by her, beautiful album, produced by you. Set the stage a little bit about where she was and how this idea of a virtual duet with your father, and how did this all come together?
Natalie and I would always sit around talking about songs and direction, because one of the things that we had in common was just that. And also that the music, which some people considered jazz, which may have been Frank Sinatra, Count Basie, or Nat King Cole, to musicians, it wasn't jazz. It was popular music for its time. And matter of fact, that's even why I fought hard on the board of governors of the Grammys with quite a few other people to make a traditional pop category. Matter of fact, Tony Bennett won a Grammy of the album that I did, and other people were nominated in that category. And that's also, this album would fit in that category, that those songs from those times were popular songs of the day, and they weren't jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Because jazz musicians didn't consider them jazz records. They considered them popular records. Because people would dance to those, So it was another routine. But what happens is, Natalie knew that the contract was ending soon with EMI Manhattan, and Jerry Griffin and some other people there were great folks, but basically she was in a quandary because music was changing at the time, and what was labeled, soul music, R&B, or pop or alternative, those lines were shifting. When you stretch the right and left of something, center mass doesn't stay in the same place. That moves around just like the right and left do. So she was trying to figure out not just a new direction, but what was she interested in? And
you mentioned self-determination.
Yeah, well,
for an artist.
That too, because there are days when having a manager and other people advise you and making choices based upon the business of it all may be part of your daily activities. But those creative moments, for why most of us started in the beginning, those keep you up nights more than the rest does. And Natalie, she had some unanswered questions in herself creatively. And also the fact that emotionally, you know, you got to remember that this wasn't just some vocalist I knew, this was my wife at the time, that it was having parental issues, you know, stuff about her mom in later years and about her dad, and quite a few things were popping up as they always do. So basically the reason why we lit on doing this music was very simple. It was almost like tipping her hat to her father. It was like saying goodbye. She never had a proper goodbye of her dad. When Natalie's dad was passing away, when he was dying, instead of the family gathering and being around him through all of this, Natalie was sent away. And you know, there's some explanations for the distance, but I'm not going to go into that right now. It's their business as far as family relationship was concerned. But instead of being close to her dad, which she really loved her dad, and I don't know if I can say this, but he was her favorite. And instead of being close, she was sent away. She never was able to say her last goodbyes to him. And for me, I've had those feelings before. I understood that. And she tried a couple times on a couple live shows to, you know, put up a tape, you know, and sing a slight duet with her father for a song. She tried it a couple times. It wasn't lit upon that we're going to do that, but it was a way of trying to get there emotionally to figure out, how do I say bye? And also not wanting.
It was like a closure. It was really much more emotional. And maybe that's what's coming through the whole album and the song especially.
Well, eventually it had to, but then you ask yourself questions about what will people think of me? You know, this is crazy. You know,
American Songbook was not exactly vogue at the time.
No. And the other categories and the other things people were doing to be popular, or what was popular at the time, had it was 360 degrees away from that.
Right.
And that's a serious decision to make when you've been quasi in competition with other artists for the charts for quite a few years. And
which is what managers and the labels want you to do.
Yes. And she also didn't want to be construed as usury, using her father for other reasons. And that's why I also told her that once you do this duet, you don't do any more. Let that be the only time. And I think that's the only thing that bothered me when we got divorced, and she wound up doing another album where she did that again. And to me, that spoils all of it, but that's just me.
Yeah.
As a producer, if there's a certain thing I did in so-and-so's record, I don't want to repeat it in every record that I do.
Yeah. Now, Andre, I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry about that.
I was just going to say, then if you keep repeating, if you do those things like that, it's not special. Plus, after Natalie did that, everyone started doing that.
Yeah. No, it was definitely a bold move, and it paid off because, you know, it was very successful. Now, you shared a production spotlight with two others, Tommy LiPuma and David Foster. Talk a little bit about that process.
I don't know how much sharing there was, because I'm the one that busted my butt for the whole thing. The one I really relied upon as far as a conversation and our process was Tommy LiPuma and Al Schmitt. David was a friend, but we kind of put together what we knew David was going to do in advance. not in totality, but everybody was allocated to what had been chosen, and I was given the body of work to do, because I'm the one who came with it. And Tommy, I hate medleys. So Tommy got the medley, and what he did is he pulled off, it was excellent the way he pulled it off, but at the time, I didn't want that medley at all. And Unforgettable, I couldn't record because that was already discussed in the beginning, Tommy and I, about, for me to do Unforgettable. And contractually, after doing Diane Schuur's record, where I'd recorded Unforgettable, it wasn't past the year yet. In other words, there was a certain period of time where I couldn't re-record that song on anyone as a producer. So we had to use that. And also, Tommy and I had always talked about that there was only going to be one single off the record, which was used to spur interest, and the album would kind of take off after that. And that's exactly what happened. So
now talk a little bit, Andre, about your work with Al Schmitt. You mentioned his name, the late and great Al Schmitt, which you also did some work just very recently before he passed. Talk a little bit about the technology at the time and this virtual duet approach, which was another first for the times. How did that work out?
Yeah, but over the years, musicians and engineers, we experiment with so many things the general public doesn't hear. Just like Les Paul and Mary Ford. I mean, Les Paul is the one who gave the multi-tracking technique, a lot of the technology to Atlantic's engineer, Tom Dowd.
Oh, of course.
Because I remember, listening to Les Paul and Mary Ford as a kid and wondering, how did he do all those things? He did them himself by multi-tracking, when other people were still recording with 2 tracks. So, I mean, we've been experimenting for a while. I used to record in between tracks on a 16-track machine, by getting the erase head not to engage. I mean, we've tried all kinds of things. And as far as sampling is concerned, or matching, putting vocals together, it's not a problem unless there's leakage, okay? And we listened to the tapes. First of all, Tommy was the one who dealt with Capitol to go ahead and get the original master of Nat, which we were hoping it had been transferred, because if it had been acetate, who knows, what the condition of the master would have been, or to get good copies of it. But,
sure.
But the deal is the arrangement on Unforgettable is set up in a certain way, because that's the way we could use the vocal, because if not, there was too much leakage, for one thing, okay? And also in Nat's vocal, when we got the tapes from Capitol, before we gave this all to David Foster to put together, there was upright bass leakage in Nat's vocal, because a lot of times the vocalists, if they weren't separated, they may record live with the orchestra. And we're so much into cleaning things up and muting things and doing that kind of separation now. But back in those live recordings where they're recording a performance, there was leakage all over the place. Same in the early Tony Bennett recordings. So the upright bass you hear on some Unforgettable, some of it's the original. Mm. Then it mixes to Jim Hewitt doing the rest of it, because Al was able to match the sound.
So you brought in not just the vocal, but also some instruments.
Well, yeah, basically the bass. The rest was all new. It was all new. And also where the solo took place and how that was structured, it had to be that way because of how we'd structured the song from the tape we'd gotten. And after Tommy and I went over this, and a lot of hours spent by Tommy clearing the tape and going through the process of it, it was handed over for David to do.
Yeah. So you mentioned you handpicked a lot of the arrangers and the musicians.
How about all of them?
All of them. Okay, so we're talking Bill Holman, Michel Legrand, Marty Paich, Clare Fischer.
one angel, Johnny Mandell, and Clare less on arrangement and more on his piano playing and set up like The Very Thought of You, Our Love Is Here to Stay. Clare played piano as well as helped me block out the arrangement on it, because all of these tunes were gone over, were rehearsed beforehand, not extensively, but enough to make sure we knew where letter A was. Because this was going to be capturing a performance with Natalie, and there was barely, I'd say less than 1% was overdubbed of anything. It was all live. The whole album was live, and it was rehearsed to record that way.
Yeah.
Which it was crucial, the recording of it, and some of the continuity, if it didn't come from choices of songs, had to come sonically. And the only one I trusted, even before Natalie even knew who Al Schmitt was Al. And so me and Tommy were already in cahoots because we were not going to let it take any other way. After, Natalie and I went to Bob Krasnow with this at Elektra, and knowing Tommy was the VP there, we were kind of surrounded by friends at that point, as far as the concept, as far as the backing. And I knew if Tommy was there, he'd watch my back just like I watched his back. But Tommy was different than me. When he produced his tracks, I didn't go to his sessions and sit behind him. When I did my dates, Tommy was up in my neck, and I used to have to tell him to sit his ass down. But the one I'd take home with me, like he was my dad, would be Al. Because I've lived with Al a couple times. I lived at his home.
Yeah.
After a couple funky divorces, I wound up living at Al's house.
Yeah.
So my relationship with him, it goes a bit beyond working with Al in the studio. Al was giving me advice on other things, and we went through alcohol and smoking cigarettes. We went through a bunch of things at different times. And I'm younger, but at times he was like my big brother, and other times he was like a dad. So it was very interesting. And also that wound up happening, unbeknownst to me, just naturally between Al and Natalie, because Natalie respected him, and I'm glad I was able to introduce her to folks that to me were excellent people. She didn't know who Tommy was, until I made her look at the back of some records that she loved.
Right.
And then she started looking at the back. Oh, he did this one. I said, yeah. So it was good. She made some great new friends. I was able to get a couple folks out of retirement, like Gerald Vinci, the concert master. He had retired. And that's the one I used for all the Rufus dates when my Uncle Clare would do the strings. And I was so used to seeing Gerald Vinci sitting there, and all of the other string players like Gayle Levant and Suzie Katayama, and I can go on and on and on. These are people I'd seen for years. I knew them all by name and their families. And that was like trying to put together a big family who would understand, help me and help my wife say goodbye to her dad.
Yes, you talked also about getting David Foster on board. You knew him from where?
I knew David from when he first came to Los Angeles. I'd heard about him from Smitty Smith. Smitty was an organ player with a group called Motherlode from Canada. And he introduced me to David, who had been with a group called Skylark. Lead singer's name was Donnie Gerard. And they had a hit record that was a great record. Cry 'cause she's a lady, dream, she's a child. Da, 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 da. Anyway, New Birth, I think, re-recorded it later, but the original record was done by Skylark. which David Foster was part of with Donnie Gerard. Donnie Gerard became a jingle singer and a great singer around Los Angeles during the 70s and 80s. You know, but that's how I met David. And then also, I was always friends with Ray Parker Jr. And Ray called me for a session for China Smith, who was a famous popular disc jockey in Los Angeles at the time. And he wanted to produce a local act called Cookie and Flat Top. And he booked time at Bollock Sound, Ike Turner's studio on La Brea. And Ray brought the bass player, and then it was he and I, and he left it to me to get the piano player. And I called Smitty and I called David Foster. And David came to Bollock and played piano on it. And that's when I met David. And I met him for some other things. We became friends. Not tight friends like him and Jay Graydon, but, you know, musician friends. And then I remember calling him in and hanging with him and Brenda Russell. And it's something that I did on Layla Hathaway, is a Brenda song that was originally cut by just me and David Foster and Brenda. There was just the three of us, and then we added all the rest. So I've known David for a minute, and let's put it this way, he's blossomed into what I call a hungry producer. When I was around David, it always feels competitive, where you know, when I'm around Quincy or other folks that I came up with or watching, I don't feel competition as much as respect. To me, my greatest respect is for David when he's not talking and he's playing the piano and arranging. I think you can't beat him with a stick.
Now, I want to go back to your past, because obviously the reason you know so many musicians is because you were started as a musician yourself, you know, playing drums with Rufus and Chaka Khan. Talk a little bit about your past and how that has influenced your work as a producer.
Okay, just a final piece on David. David, I recommended David to Tommy. We were talking about a missing element, and the element was it would be great to have a producer in the mix that had pop credibility. Because mine was nebulous at the time between, you know, R&B or whatever, and Tommy was known for George Benson and, you know, more kind of jazzy popular. And I thought David would be the perfect person to do that single that I wasn't going to do.
So the pop element, that makes sense.
Well, the pop element wasn't for the music. The pop element was for the name and the PR on the back of a record that a disc jockey would see.
Now you're being honest.
Yeah, well, I'm being honest, and it worked, and it worked because it was the right thing to do, and it was the right choice. And David did an excellent job, and that's history. And that's exactly how it worked out, and it did what it was supposed to do on more than one level. Let's put it that way. And I'm beholden to him, and also reducing his rate. And his manager, Brian, I remember when Brian told me what his fee was, I said, man, that's half the budget for the record, okay? So
which is part of the job of a producer, right? To manage the budget.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus. Ugh.
With the size of the orchestra you had, that would be, and the arrangers, that would be hard to do.
Yeah, well, I've burned that abacus many times. You know what? But we came in under budget. Under budget or almost right at. We didn't go over budget. And the next album, Take a Look, didn't go over budget either. And that was half the budget of the first one.
Yeah. So why is it that a lot of drummers become producers?
Well, ask Maurice White and Phil Collins.
Exactly.
And a lot of people. It's because I know everyone's part. But you got to remember that you say drummer, but I consider myself a musician. If I just make myself a drummer, that kind of limits me. And matter of fact, when I started playing music, I played trumpet and trombone. And drums I took up because you could bash them around. When they wanted me to do a dance step with my trombone, I said, nah, I ain't doing that. So drums and drummers seem to work more. But I like the drums, but I had some training in drumming, but I don't consider myself a drummer's drummer. I consider myself a drummer who plays the songs. In other words, if you solo my recorded tracks where I'm playing and you turn the overhead mic up, I'm humming and singing the song. Okay, so to me, I'm playing the song less than playing a beat. I'm playing a song.
Right.
So that's what I think I got to it. Plus, between my dad being an arranger, my uncle Clare, an arranger and composer, and my mother, a vocalist, I was kind of in a nice little vortex there.
Right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and say a little bit about your Rufus days as well. But then I want to segue into how this is sort of maybe like an album about families. And,
yeah,
you know, it's like father and daughter, father and son. You know, you hear the song at weddings, you know, it's the first dance or the dance with father and daughter.
Yeah.
It's in fact, it's a top 10 wedding song at, you know, so that relationships and the importance of it, you come from a musical family.
Yeah. And also that those songs that Nat King Cole sang, so did my mother. In other words, those popular songs were sung by many great artists. And there was a reverence for it. And to me, it was reverence too, that there's a big picture I had. Yeah, there's Johnny. There's a big picture I had made of Nat sitting in front of an organ with his hat on. And I had it blown up like 10 times its size, and that was in our den. And, you know, before I'd go to bed at night, I'd walk through the den and tip my hat. You know, I'd always tip my hat to Nat, or seeing his picture or some of the other greats' pictures down the hall at Capitol Records. When I go past those pictures, that means a lot to me. My whole life and childhood was based upon listening to everybody on that wall. So there's a kind of reverence that's involved with it as far as that's concerned. And those songs were popular in all neighborhoods. In other words, to be able to communicate with all kinds of people on that level with music, it let me know the power of music and how it can be influential and emotional. And it's very soothing, and it does a good job for us poor humans down here on this little green ball.
Well, speaking of humans, also, I remember, I think this came from Natalie actually, was a story of how when her family, her successful family, moves to Beverly Hills, and you know, the morning after was not all that welcoming. And that says a lot about the times and racial tensions, which we, you know, we see today, but, you know, they were a lot tenser then.
Well, when I come from a mixed family, when my mother and father married, it was against the law in 47 states. Okay, so I am a product of that. That's
right.
To know that when I would be on tour with my father, I remember sometimes there was a problem going through certain states that I had to stay in the truck at gas stations and truck stops. And then someone asking, you know, what was I? And that it was easier to be Mexican than to be Black. And there's all kind of instances of being at a bus stop with my mother and someone asking me if that was my maid. There's all kind of instances, or telling someone what I did during the summer and hearing two teachers talk about me in the lunchroom and equated the good things I did in class with my white father, and the bad things I did in class equated to my Black mother, who they'd never met and didn't even know. So I've been through all of those things where music became not a refuge, because I couldn't hide in it, because my musician family wouldn't let you. you know, it was like the constant student around my house. And that because man was stupid didn't have anything to do with making good music. Just because somebody called me a name or something was dumb, or there were bad things happening in the world, that had nothing to do with the fact that I needed to practice a little bit more. In other words, if you're going to be proficient at this and you really love it, you'll put the time in. Yeah. It's funny because when the quarantine came with COVID, I've spent so many hours practicing as a kid that staying one-minded, you know, or in an environment that I have to stay inside, that didn't bother me.
Yeah.
You just practice.
Done that before.
Yeah.
It's therapeutic.
Yeah, or as the gangsters say, you hit the mattresses, you know. You know, so it's cool. But going back to the Rufus stuff, you know, that's a couple hours by itself. That started back in '72 when a gentleman I was being mentored by, Richard Evans, who was a great arranger, who did Soulful Strings for Cadet, who did Peabo Bryson's album with Feel the Fire on it, who did Ramsey Lewis, who did many artists as a producer, and then also wound up as a professor, instructor at Berklee School of Music, and taught Esperanza Spalding and Layla Hathaway. That was my mentor. And Richard told me that a friend of his, Charles Colbert, was looking for a drummer for this group in Chicago. Hang on a second. I got a cord that says my computer's acting funny.
Okay.
So I'm trying to, let me plug it in.
Sure.
It says if you don't plug it in soon, it's going to go to sleep.
Okay.
All right. Give me 1 second.
Sure thing.
Is that possible?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, it just plugged in.
All right, I could hear it.
I heard I heard the little sound it made. You know, I've been having cord problems. I use it so much that the cord just gets all.
Well, we all are. We all are in this kind of Zoom era. Hey, you know, my main thing was with the Rufus, you as a drummer, is how it's affected your production work.
Well, being a member of a group, I wasn't just playing drums. We all did many duties. That's what happens in a band. A band's like a family.
You write, you arrange.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's your turn to do dishes tonight. You know, it's that kind of routine. So for me, I have that kind of brain. My brain is sequential at times, and the little managerial vibe I have is based on my father, who was a shop foreman all the time. He was manager of bands as well as the head arranger, and he always had this air about him, like, give it to Mikey, he'll eat it, you know? And I have the same thing, and sometimes I'm not in control of it. It's in my DNA. And what it is it gives the illusion that I know what it is and I can handle it. So what I had to do is learn how to make those things come true, or else it was a false positive. It's having people trust you and you can't deliver. So I learned how to deliver. That's what my family taught me.
Yeah. And so it started early, and certainly a lot of those skills are transferring to production work.
Yeah, definitely. But the Rufus stuff it was all of us, every member in Rufus, the first Rufus, was capable of production. We all sat there. They were all songwriters. They all arranged. Quite a few of them had been already successful with American Breed and other groups that they'd been in. So it wasn't a novice bunch of kids with a dream.
But this was before the Pro Tools studio where you could actually record your stuff. I mean, imagine what all of you could have done if you had the tools of today. You could all be just sitting and putting out a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you get a different opinion.
Okay.
Because sometimes the time it takes to go through the technological process of doing things, you could have recorded a couple takes already.
Yeah. So mastering and something really, really well has a value.
Well, it's like working with Al. We still, even though I recorded digitally, after the transition came, I still mixed on a board, not in the box, and I mixed to a half-inch ATR, at as fast as it could go, as far as that's concerned. And if you A/B'd that against digital, it was hard to tell the difference, and basically analog. I mixed to analog. So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, the point is these are just tools. In other words, what I do is not dictated by what new technology they come up with. Mine is content based.
Creativity.
Regardless of how I have to record it or what machine I use or what process, it's still based upon, do I have the song?
The content.
Is there somebody that can sing this damn thing? What's up? So that's still my bottom line. So I've gone through all kinds of transitions. I deal with Pro Tools as well as Logic, as well as GarageBand. I don't care what it is. Yeah. Because when you hear the record, I don't expect for you to sit there and pick out which part of it is a drum machine, and what's real and what's Memorex. I want you to hear a total picture where all of it together makes what you're listening to, as opposed to, well, let me listen to it to figure out what it all is.
The song, going back, as you said, it's all about the song. It was covered in '65 by Marvin Gaye, by Andrea Bocelli, by Sia, Finding Dory, and then also sampled by Nas in a song he has called Can't Forget About You. What do you think it is about the song that lives and moves us today? How does that happen?
Listen to the words. Okay, and I heard somebody say the words to me, and they were just as potent as they were when someone sang them. And either you're talking about something you can relate to. It's like who's going to pay to go see a band that they have no idea what they're doing? In other words, when you go see them, you have no idea what you're seeing. That's not what we do. We go see things that are relatable, even if it's something new or avant-garde. If you can't connect with it, why are you paying your money to go? There's a thread that connects us, and that thread is humanity. And that thread takes us through the gamut of emotions and what we perceive emotionally and also intellectually. And those aren't unique only to us or folks who only make music. That's to human beings. And so there's relatable things that we do with each other that strike a chord, because apparently the human condition needs to be affected like that. If not, it wouldn't affect us. All right, so there's something about the words and about the melody. It's like you could take 3 or 4 notes for a melody and hum it to a baby and they'll go to sleep. I mean, I'm not saying anything new, or the scientific tests about what your brain does while listening to music, or what your brain does while you're performing music. All the scientific reasons. I didn't need all that. All I had to do was go to church and to know that there was a woman stretched out in the aisle, that the spirit had got her, and my hands up in the air. I didn't know what it was, but my whole body was awake. Yeah. In my spirit. So that's how it affects us. And that's why I feel not gifted, but grateful to be involved in something that has that effect on me first. I'm not talking about my effect on other people. I'm talking about it affects me. There's songs I hear now. I listen to Tommy's old record, Gate of Dreams, that Klaus Ogerman did. There's a couple movements in that album. Also, Schmitt engineered that, Al and Tommy. And it's a Klaus Ogerman album. Michael Brecker's on it and Joe Sample. And I'll play that. And there's a couple sections there where it goes to this one part and I begin to cry. It immediately makes me cry. And I think of my father. I see
That's
my
amazing, right? Yeah.
I said to my father. And when it first happened to me, it's like I had to turn it off.
Yeah.
I couldn't face it because it hurt because my dad had passed away. Now I put it on purpose. And when it gets to that place, I smile because it's as if I'm connected to him.
Right.
So
that's beautiful. That's exactly how I think that's how fans connect to artists and songs, because
yes.
it speaks to them firsthand. Andre, I want to talk a little bit also about what you're doing now. You have worked since then. Of course, you've worked with many divas, including Nina Simone and others. Talk a little bit about that, and also your educational work.
Dusty Springfield, Gladys Knight, Patti LaBelle, Diane Schuur. I did a couple good records with Diane Schuur. Every production I've done, I've never done an instrumental record. They've all been vocalists. You know, Tony Bennett. So the deal is also the one I really liked a couple songs on a long time ago was Tata Vega. And Tata Vega was the voice of Suge in The Color Purple in the movie. She's the one who did all the singing in The Color Purple. And Tata was a great voice. And Sylvia St. James. I mean, there's been a lot of good vocals around, a lot of great songs. So for me, I've always think that's because of my mom, you know, a vocalist in the family. And she was the less technical, even though she was trained to a point. She talked in things of views of moods, colors, and feels when she talked, or she'd make me play brushes on a magazine to accompany her while she sang a song while she's doing the dishes. And then she'd make comments on my accompanying prowess. And the better I got, the more she encouraged me and tell me to wait at the end of a vocal phrase, or don't step on the vocal, or who's ever playing the melody. She taught me all those things. So I'm very lucky to have come from that. Matter of fact, it was hard to do anything else when I tried to box and play football and you know, do all these sport things, which I thought one would get me into college was the football. And I was okay at it in high school, but then it was harder and harder to do dangerous sports when I knew it would affect my appendages to play music. So I had to make a choice between music and doing these other physical things. And music made me happier more most of the time, as opposed to, it didn't give me any exercise, but it sure gave my heart and my mind pause.
I totally relate, even though I'm not a performing musician. But you know, when I was in university, I read this book called What Color is Your Parachute? And it really allows you to examine what are some things that really make you drive and you know, passionate in life. And music always came up because my dad was a musician, and you know, I just loved music. It was always music in the house. So yeah, it's very important for young people. I know you have kids, and I want to thank you for just having this conversation with us. Thank you for Unforgettable. And I'm sure we're going to hear more divas and more music coming from you. So thank you. And a little shout out to our sponsor, Trans Audio Group, as well. So
that's good. Yeah, there's more things coming up, but the educational work that I do here. Also, I didn't get a chance to mention that I moved back here to Minnesota to become dean of a music college. I was dean here for about 4 years, and then dean at another school after that, and then more into education and workshops now in about 4 or 5 locations, dealing with about 300 kids a day in music, and basically it's youth social work mixed in with music as a means of communication. It's like the silver penny to bring them through the door.
This is your nonprofit, and it's called
Twin Cities Mobile Jazz Project. Okay. And it's on Facebook and Twitter and all those other places. But more than that, we do good work here. And we've had a lot of great students come through our program and a lot of great musicians here in town. And artists are our instructors, are our mentors. And this is now going into our 8th year. And I'm very happy. And we've gone from a couple of volunteers to about 30 people.
Awesome. And of course, you can find Andre on online, AllMusic, Studio Expresso, Wikipedia, everywhere. So look him up and check his many pages of credits, and more to come.
It's mileage. It's like mileage on a car. Can we dial the odometer back a little?
It's like it's definitely more than 10,000 hours.
Oh God! If I was been flying an airplane, they would have retired me already.
You would be flying a jet plane by now.
Yeah, and people say, well, God, I don't believe how old you are. I said, well, when you wake up in the morning, you don't wake up in an age. The only time I know how old I am is when I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh God, who's that?
Timeless, like unforgettable. Andre Fischer, thank you.
Thank you, Clary.